Hey YouTube, my name is Nick, and in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to install the Flippy Drive into a Panasonic Q. And so, the reason why we're starting off with my computer is because I want to begin this whole process by having us set up the MicroSD card, because it is quite a lengthy process to get the Flippy Drive installed into the Panasonic Q. And so, it would be just much easier if we already had the MicroSD card set up and plugged into the Flippy Drive itself so that we don't have to worry about it later, and so that we don't forget before we close it all up, because then you have to undo a lot of work in order to get the microSD card in there. So without further ado, this is the beginning, and the first thing we need to do is download this configuration file, which we can do by clicking this little download button. And if you want, before you click download or after, you can just read through all these comments which tell you what each of these settings do. If you're interested in having FTP access to your Panasonic Q, or at least the Flippy Drive anyway, which will be inside your Panasonic Q, you can try setting this information here, but I found that currently on version 1.46, FTP has been kind of hit and miss. So if you want to know how to do this, I did make a video on this topic previously, and I'll leave that linked in the description. But I'm just going to go ahead and download this config file right here. And so all you need to do is you need to open your Flippy Drive, and just before you actually copy the config.ini, you want to make sure that you have it formatted to exFAT. In Windows, you can simply do this by right-clicking your drive and then going to, it might be properties, it might be format. I'm probably showing it on the screen right now. But if it says format, then you want to just change it to exFAT. And then once that completes, then you can start to copy over your files. So copy over the config.ini to the root of your microSD card and copy over all the games you want on your system. And then you can safely eject your microSD card and move on. So after you've ejected your microSD card from your computer with the config.ini file all set up for the Flippy Drive, the first thing we're going to do before we even tear down the Panasonic Q is we're going to take out the actual Flippy Drive itself, and we're just going to immediately start by inserting the microSD card into it. And the reason why we're doing this right off the bat is just so that we don't forget to insert it after we put this inside the Panasonic Q. So you just insert the microSD card into a slot like this, and click it in until you hear it make the little click noise. And then we'll just put the Flippy Drive back into the anti-static bag for now. Half the work to get this modchip/ODE installed is actually taking this thing apart. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to set these things aside for now, because in order to install the Flippy Drive into the Panasonic Q, we basically have to tear this thing down entirely. What most people say they should do first in order to take apart the Panasonic Q is that they'll say that they'll start by removing these screws. And we will do that, because obviously we do have to do that, but I think I'm going to change it up a little, and I think the first thing that everybody should do when they take apart their Panasonic Q is they should carefully rotate it on its side and carefully flip it so that the bottom side of it is exposed. And what we want to do is you want to actually remove these two screws first. So next, you want to flip this back up, and I want to make note that these screws, these black screws, every time you see this type of black screw inside the Panasonic Q, these are all the same size, so you can kind of just keep these screws together in one pile and not have to worry about remembering where they go. So with those two first screws out of the way, the reason why we took those off first is because when we get to the part where we have to remove the front faceplate, if you don't remove those screws, it will get stuck, which is why I decided to remove them right away so that we don't have to worry about them later. So the next step would be to remove these screws, and we'll have to do this on both sides. So before we can do anything with that side plate, we also have to remove these two screws. So by removing these two black screws and these four silver screws, in order to remove this side plate, you kind of just want to like push into it a little bit, like with very little force, and just kind of like raise it up and grab the edge of it, and it should come off the side like that. And the next step that we're going to do is we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. And I'm just going to set the side plate out of the way. So we're just going to rotate this and do the same thing for this side. So again, when it comes to the back, we're going to remove these two screws. Rotating it back to the side. Push it in a little bit and just pull up and grab the edge of it, and the side should come off. Alright, so the next step to get the Panasonic Q apart is we have to unplug this cable. So just carefully rock it back and forth and pull, and it should come out. And you want to do the same with this cable here as well. This one I find is always a lot easier to pull than this one, so this one you really need to be careful because it feels like the socket is kind of loose. So just, you know, be careful, don't apply too much force. Just kind of rock it out. The next step of what we have to do is... Oh, I actually almost forgot. The next step we have to do, since I didn't do it right away, is we have to remove these two screws, because now the lid is going to come off, and if you do not remove these two screws, that will not happen. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now. So now we need to rotate it back to the sides and kind of have the Q facing towards you, because that makes it easiest. But if you'll see, right about here, there's a little bit of a plastic clip. And so what you need to do is you want to kind of just put your thumb or index finger on this little square piece, so that you can kind of just push until the point where this little plastic nub comes out of this square hole. And moving to the other side, you have to also do the same thing. You just push on this little square and it should separate. And then the top comes off. But before you completely remove the top, there are these three things that need to be disconnected. And I'm going to show you a technique that I use for this. But basically what I do to help make this easier for me is that I usually grab a stack of like Xbox 360 games, like usually 8 or so. Or you can just use any standard DVD cases. And so what I like to do is I basically grab the top like this and flip it over like so. And then I kind of rotate the whole Q and the stack of games so that it kind of holds the lid. And then I just start disconnecting all three connectors here just by carefully pulling. Usually I go by the black and white cables first. With the green connector, I start by pulling on that. Just give it a little wiggle. There we go, and it comes out. And then we have the rainbow colored cable, or the somewhat rainbow colored cable. There we go, little wiggle does the trick. And then this one you just pull straight out. And there you go. So then you separate the top lid from the whole unit. And we want to set this aside and keep it safe. The next step in order to take apart the Q is that there are these little screws on each side of the Q. There's one here, it's a black screw. If it doesn't come out properly, I'll show a better image, but there's a screw here. And then there's this other screw on the other side. Same type of deal right here. And so you just need to unscrew those. All right, just like that. The next step is to remove this front plate. And so since we already removed the two screws that were right about here from the beginning of this teardown, this part should be a lot easier than if those were still stuck in place. Because I remember when I first took apart the Q for the first time, I was struggling to get this front plate off, and I was wondering, why the hell is this thing not coming off? Well, it's because those two screws were there, but since we took care of those right away, in order to get this front faceplate off, what we need to do is we need to put our thumb against this little square piece, similar to what we did with the top lid. And you want to do that on both sides, but usually this side seems to come easier for me. So you kind of just, you can even do it with your index finger as well, but you kind of just push into, because like there's this little plastic piece going into this wedge or whatever that's about the same size of it, so that's how it clips into place. And so you just want to kind of push on it until it moves past that little wedge. and then it should slide forward a bit, and you want to do the same thing on the other side, and it should come off the front of it like this. So since we're taking apart the whole Q, you might as well disconnect this front plate right now, because this will have to be out of our way. This ribbon cable is kind of like fed into a little channel. There we go. Okay, so I think you kind of saw, but like you kind of have to maneuver this ribbon cable so that it's like it's above these two notches here, and then you can kind of just pull up on it. Be very careful with this cable, because if you break this cable, it's very, very difficult to get a replacement for this, because the standard GameCube cable that connects the front plate to the actual motherboard itself is not identical to the one that's used in the Panasonic Q. Because on the standard GameCube, it's like soldered directly to the board that holds the clock battery, but that's not so the case on the Panasonic Q. On the Panasonic Q, it's just slotted in just like you would for this end of the connector. So just be very, very delicate and very, very careful with this ribbon cable. And I just don't like ribbon cables personally, just because I feel like they're very sensitive. So we can set this aside for now. If you need to change the clock battery, you basically just undo these screws, and it would be right under this board. In fact, I can kind of show it here. It's sitting like right about there is the clock battery. So you would just take out that board too, and then you can solder in a new one, or solder a CR2032 clock battery holder. But for now, we're not interested in replacing the clock battery. We are only interested in installing the Flippy Drive for the Panasonic Q. So moving on, we're getting kind of closer to our goal, but we're still not quite there yet. There's still quite a bit to do. So what we're going to do at this stage is we're going to rotate the Q all the way so that the back is facing towards us. And basically we're just going to remove all of these black screws that remain on the back so that we can fully take this thing apart. But the first thing that we'll have to take out very carefully is the disk drive. But anyhow, what we're going to do is we're just going to remove all the screws that are on the back here. So now that you removed all the screws from the back of the Panasonic Q, in order to remove the drive, you kind of don't just pull up on it directly, because it still kind of sits on these little locking tab mechanisms that kind of help hold it in place despite the fact that we removed all the screws. So the technique used to get the disk drive out of its place is that you kind of have to like lift it up and forward a little, and then it should come apart from the back of the metal plate. So kind of just grab it like this, and then just carefully lift it forward a little. And what you want to do is kind of flip it so that it's laying down on its back like this. So again, being very gentle is very important. And now what we need to do is we need to disconnect 3 ribbon cables from this board. So that's one. Here's another one. Okay, that's 2. I didn't like the way how this cable was bending, this ribbon cable, so what I did was I just unplugged it from the actual disk drive mechanism itself. And to free the rest of it from the console, you just have to take out this screw here. And you kind of just pull up on this a little, and it should disconnect from the disk drive connector. There you go. So this separates. And now we have the main unit. So our end goal is to connect the Flippy drive with the flex cable to this connector right here. But there's still a little bit more we have to do in order to get access to this part right here. So with the disk drive out of the way, the next step is to simply pull up on the component out port. And on the Panasonic Q, it's actually attached to this ribbon cable instead of it being directly on the GameCube motherboard. And you don't have to worry about removing these screws because these screws just attach to this metal piece. And so we just want to move this out of the way for now. So once you move the component video out port out of the way on the Panasonic Q, the next step is to remove the back plate, which works similar to how the front plate does. So you kind of just need to push on it a little to kind of get it to move beyond the little notch that's here. So you have to do this on both sides, and then it should come out. So I realized why this side panel wasn't coming off, and it's because I missed a single screw. I literally fell for the same trap like when I had trouble removing the front plate. Just one screw holding me back. Is there another screw that I missed? There is. Oh my god. Make that 2 screws. So much easier. I don't know what this plastic bit is that just broke, but finally. I can't believe that was such a battle just to get this off, and not even for a good reason, just because I've never done this before. Okay, so with that out of the way, now we're getting somewhere. So the next step is that there's these white clips on the power supply, and basically what you need to do is you need to pinch them with something small so that you can like kind of squeeze them through the holes that hold it up. Up, but there is, so I'm not sure if this needs to be removed. So you have to disconnect this little black and white cable here, and you need to disconnect this thing as well. Actually, there's a clip on it. Okay, yeah, there's a little clip on it that you can press down on that will release it. And this should also have a clip on it, I think. Yeah, it does. This also has a clip on it, so just pull this and kind of support it on the corners here, and then there we go. You don't need to remove this board entirely, you just need to disconnect these 2 sets of cables. So we can kind of just have this sit a little bit out of the way. The next thing is to unplug this connector here. So the way how I got this thing open was because I don't have fingernails, I kind of just used a flathead screwdriver and just carefully like pushed on the left and right edges of this thing until eventually it wedged itself out. And now I think if I pull, this should come out. Or if it doesn't, then I need to do a little more wedging, but there we go. So just give it a little tug and then it comes out. You should see that, this is in the way. You need to kind of pull this forward. So yeah, if you do that little technique where you inch it left and right with a flathead screwdriver, then you should be able to get it out. But I swear, I struggled for at least a good 10-20 minutes just to get these disconnected. Okay, good. That is out of the way now. So there is another connector similar to the one that I just removed, and that one also has to be undone. So because these 3 cables here and the little connector or the attachment mechanism is smaller, I actually did these with the needle nose plier and just carefully pulled on it until it's separated like that. There's still 2 more connectors that need to be removed in order to have this separate from the GameCube motherboard so that it's out of the way. And it's below this one ribbon cable. There's like these 2 colorful connectors here. These need to be removed. Alright, so there's a little bit of struggle, but basically I had to remove this connector, which I used this just to kind of like pry on it. These were easy, I just pulled on them and they came out, but this I had to like push a little bit up on, you can actually see it here, these little, there's like these little white rods, and I kind of just pushed the edge of my flathead screwdriver on these to disconnect this. And so you really don't need to fully disconnect this stuff from the board entirely, because now at least these components are out of our way enough to work on the actual GameCube itself. So the next step is to remove this fan, which I should probably clean now that I have it like this far apart and it's pretty easy to access. So there's 2 screws here, 2 Phillips heads, and they're the same black ones that we've been using this entire time. They're these ones. So just remove those. And now this should separate. So I guess, well, one thing we can do right now very quickly is we can just disconnect the component cable. We'll do that just by pulling up here. There we go. So we can just set this component cable connector aside. Now we just need to undo this little plastic clasp so that we can move the fan out of the way and the cables for it. You just push this down a little, and then this should come up. Yep, so now we can move the fan out of the way, and I can clean this a little better in a little bit. And we just need to also free these cables. Alright, so that's out of my way. We need to lift up this board, it looks like. The thing that's holding this little board in place are these white plastic clips. There's one here, and there's one a little bit over here. You'll see it when you're looking at it, but you just squeeze them and then it should pop through. Okay, that's one. And then I have to do the other plastic clip back here. You just squeeze both ends. And this should separate. There we go. Oh, there's a third one that I missed. Okay, so there's another one over here. Off to the side. It makes like a triangle. There we go. This is now separated. Pretty simple. We'll just set this aside for now. We can just move this out of our way. And now we're getting much, much, much closer to the actual Flippy Drive installation. So all we have left are these 3 screws, which will remove this top plate. And then we can actually get on with the installation. So I need my, here it is, my Phillips head screwdriver. So, oh, I missed a screw. There's actually 4 screws that hold the metal shielding to the top of this GameCube motherboard. I forgot these screws, these memory card port screws. Those are also very important, and they also hold the metal shielding down, or at least they must be, because that's why it's not coming up. So should be able to pull these up. Okay. Set those aside. Now this should come up. Yep, just like that. So that is the GameCube motherboard. It is just like a standard Nintendo GameCube. Nothing special. It is, of course, a Japanese region Nintendo GameCube. So if you were to go further and undo these screws, these 6 screws on this heatsink, and then carefully like wedge it and then like lift it up, you could change the region or add a region switch to the Panasonic Q so that you can play North American GameCube games on this console as well. From the disc, that is. But since I currently do not know if my disk drive even works, we're not going to cover how to do the region change in this video. But it's basically, there are lots of videos out there that cover this. And you can see how they do it, and the process is basically the same, but with all the complicated steps of owning a Panasonic Q first. Anyway. So with that out of the way, now that this is exposed, this is the actual disk drive reader that we need to install the Flippy Drive to, because now we need to take out this Q flex cable, and we need to make a W-like bend to this part of the cable. So we're going to take this out of here. So here is the flex cable for the Q variant of the Flippy Drive. And if your ribbon cable does not say Q Flex on it, you'll have to message the creators of the Flippy Drive so that you can ask to get the proper cable, because with the way that this cable is shaped, you cannot use it in the normal Flippy drive, and also vice versa. Even though the mod chip itself or the optical drive emulator is the same between both, and the only difference is the ribbon cable, that is also a very important distinction. But anyway, the same process needs to be done with the Q flex cable, which you need to bend this part until you get a W-like shape. So yeah, you kind of want to fold your Q flex cable kind of like this. And then you just want to slot the middle part between the disk drive connector. And you want to have it pointed so that it's facing inwards, unlike on the regular Flippy Drive flex cable, which points outwards. So once you have your Q flex cable installed into the GameCube's optical disk drive connector like so, what you want to do is you kind of have to slip the ribbon cable kind of like in front of this plate, but behind this piece. And you kind of want it to go like this, and then you kind of have to just bend this up like so. Be very, very slow and very, very gentle when you do this, because if you pinch this flex cable and the traces break, this will not work. But you can kind of see what I did here. You slip it through just like that, and then you bend it up. So once you have your Q flex cable oriented the way I have mine, the next thing you want to do is you want to insert your MicroSD card into your Flippy drive if you haven't done it earlier, like I suggested. So you want the pins to face toward you when you're holding it like this, and then we want to rotate it towards the back like this, because the Flippy drive must connect into this connector here. And if we were to attach the Flippy drive to the mounting bracket, it would sit like this, and the connector would be on the bottom side, which would be more difficult. So the 3D printed piece has to face that way, and the bottom notch, where there's no screw hole, has to face that way. So before we mount this piece, which you also should have had included a very thin piece of double-sided tape. This would stick to the bottom of this, which would sit right here so that this doesn't move. But first thing we're going to do is we're going to attach the Flippy drive to this Q flex cable. There we go. That's connected. Okay. So now that we have the Flippy drive connected, now we have to attach it to the mounting bracket, and then this has to just press fit into place. There we go. Easy. That's how it should have been when I first did the installation. So now the next part is to just stick down this bracket with this double-sided tape that they include in the package. You gotta stick half of it onto the 3D printed mounting bracket, and then you pull it off after you stick the sticky side onto the 3D printed mounting bracket, and then you stick it to the lid of the housing. That's how it works. So now that is set up in place, now it's just a matter of well, putting this whole thing back together. So now we're going to go through that process. So let's start by undoing what I did, which the first thing we should do is put these back. The next thing we need to do is we need to add back 3 of these screws. Or I think it was 4 actually. So the next step we're going to do to get this back together is we're going to actually put this board back into place. And all we have to do is push down, and the clips should spread back to how they were originally before I squeeze on them to collapse it. So this board is back in place. This will attach to the wall. This attaches to this board that goes here. What else? This needs to go back. We'll do the fan first. Does it feed through? Oh, I think it feeds through there. Wait, and then this, yeah, this also has to feed up through here. Yeah, that makes sense. There we go. See, that sits the way it should. This connects here. There you go. Now we're gonna put in the 2 screws that hold this. This needs to be cable managed here. I can fix this once I get this up and kind of get a sense of where that goes. This was routed like over this way somehow. And then it was also fed through here because there was like a little bit of, it goes into this connector. There's a little bit of extra space. So one thing I should do before I continue is I should connect back the component cable port. This plugs in right here. Now we need to reconnect all these cables back to this board. So that's going to be fun. When it comes to these cables, these two, they connect with the white cable to the leftmost position on both connectors. So first thing we need to do is we need to straighten this out and kind of line up on this board. There's like these 2 notches. You want it to kind of sit right about here. Yeah, that feels right. So again, the white cable on this 3 set of cables must be to the leftmost position. So once you got all 3 inserted, and just push it straight in. And then you want to push this latch forward. This will lock this connector in place. And you want to do the same thing for this one. Although, I think we're going to hold off on this one for a second because there's 2 connectors down here that we need to worry about. There's the fan connector, which goes all the way down here. There's also this power board connector, or whatever this is from the GameCube motherboard. This little notch has to be pointed up when you plug it back into the fan connector all the way down here. So it goes like this. There you go, nice click there. And then we got to slip these back in. These 4 wires with the white cable being to the leftmost hole. Make sure that it's all the way in, good. And then we push this in to lock the cable in place. So I confirmed that we have connected back everything necessary. So I'm just gonna move the component cable connector out of the way for a second. And we're gonna pull this back up into place because we're going to reattach this board to its spot. Reconnect this first, just like this. There we go, it makes a tiny little click. We're gonna reconnect this as well. Just like that, also makes a small click. Now we can line this up with the holes. Okay, this is back in its spot. The next step is to reattach the back plate. And so this can be done by simply pushing it against the back of the system, lining up the DVD board holes. and then just kind of pushing left and right to get it seated back into place. Moving on, continuing with the reassembly of the Q, we're going to pick up where we left off, and we are going to reattach the component out port and just push it back into place. Now when you flip it around, you can see that that's lined up properly, so component cable goes there, and that is good. Next step, we are going to add the front plate back on. And this is going to make adding the disk drive a little bit more tricky because in order to reconnect the disk drive, we have to reattach those 3 ribbon cables while this is also in our way. Or we just have to keep it rested on top like I think I did earlier. So to reconnect this ribbon cable, simply feed it through this opening here. And then you kind of just have to reconnect it to the GameCube motherboard, kind of like this. So the disk drive has to be placed on top like this. And first we need to reattach the actual connector, which kind of sits kind of like this. Okay, give a nice firm little push on this little connector here. Grab one of the black screws and put it into this hole to secure the disk drive. Okay, it's good, nice and secure. Now the difficult part is reconnecting these ribbon cables. So this ribbon cable goes all the way to the back, this little open one right here. This middle one goes to this one right here. And then this last one goes to the very first one, as it is the largest one that is here. Okay, and now this cable runs right here. Just plug it into here. Okay, that was actually pretty easy. Now we just take this, flip it back up. Oh, and I think I made a mistake because there's one ribbon cable that is stuck. Okay, these are all in the correct spot. Now you just gotta simply flip this back up and clip it back in. So this is really easy after all the things we've done, and all that's left is to connect 5 cables, and then this will be good to test, but I'm not going to test until tomorrow morning because it is kind of late. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this back into place. Oh. So it is the next day. I have my Panasonic Q basically all hooked up. All I need to do is plug in the power, and then we will see if this works. I really hope this works because it took so many hours just to get this thing back together. Especially if you haven't done it before, it really does take a while. You got to be slow, careful, and patient. So I'm going to plug it in now. Okay, so it didn't explode. We got the red light. But anyhow, without further ado, let's see what happens. I'm going to press game because I can't remember if I left it on DVD mode, but hopefully it works. Okay, it powers up. Didn't explode. No video though. So more than a day has passed since I showed my last clip where I started up my Panasonic Q and all I got was a black screen. And so basically what I did was yesterday I took apart my Panasonic Q again, all the way down to the motherboard, just like I showed you how to do in this video. And all I basically did was reseat the Q flex cable and the Flippy drive itself. I basically unplugged everything and replugged everything. And so this is what happens now when I start it up. So as you can see, it seemingly boots. Notice how the menu's in English. So there's the Q bootloader, and those are the games I have on the MicroSD card that I inserted into the Panasonic Q. But if you notice, if I try to move the thumbstick, nothing happens, despite the fact that these ports are lit up. I'm not sure why it's doing that despite the fact that these ports are lit up. So it should be working, and I think the Flippy drive has something to do with it. And again, it does take some time. I'm just going to show you here, but there it is, just perfect timing. It's going to freeze, and now it's just totally stuck. And I've read that updating the firmware could help to fix it. If updating to 1.46 does not fix this problem, then I can also revert back to 1.42 because that's the last stable version, apparently. So I could have had a bad flash to my particular Flippy drive that I ordered from Crowd Supply.